to do it. Let me try. To 11?
No, it's not. I just did that. Not really.
Okay. I could.
She's gonna kill me. She's gonna end up getting picked up at 8 o'clock tonight. You watch.
Who's barking?
It wasn't me, but I reserve the right to have a barking dog in the background at some point this evening.
All right, so I heard Joe and Karen. I think I see Christina on, and I see Tony. We're waiting on a couple other people to join.
Are we doing video or just audio? Because I only see myself.
That's your choice.
My video is not working, is it?
Well, what's everybody else doing? So, you know, I want to be part of the crowd.
I'm happy to do video if we want to do video.
I've been told I have a good face for radio.
Too late, Joe. You've already been recorded several times.
My video is not working. Something's wrong with my video.
All right, I see Karen Hurst joined, so we're just missing a couple of board members.
Peter,
Yep.
I'm also seeing non-board members in video.
Up to them whether they want to turn their video on or off.
Okay, just to understand how we're going to work this, that's all.
Yep.
But anybody that-
How do you get to see them? I don't get to see anybody else. All I see is your beautiful face.
Oh, well, thank you, dear. If you go to that, like you're on an iPad, right, Karen?
Yes.
If you kind of touch the upper left corner of it and it says, there's like a gallery view. It kind of pops up as a little option.
Oh, all right.
No, I didn't have that option. Where did you find that?
But I'm
Well,
doing
then I'm on my phone.
Oh, wow. You put on makeup.
Who, Karen?
Not me.
Not
Oh,
me.
yes, Karen. That other Karen. She looks very nice.
I did do my hair.
Being that my husband the other day, I walked past him for something. He's like, "You look different." Oh, wait a minute. You finally put makeup on. I was like, "Thanks, bud. Thanks."
This is a way to cleanse our skin.
Very least I could do is
We're all
get out
going
of my pajamas for this. All right, I'm just trying to see. I don't have the option to do.
Oh, now I see the gallery view. Perfect. That's
Wait,
helpful.
no, I don't have that though.
Oh,
Can you
go
guys
to
hear
your
me?
upper left-hand. Are you on an iPad?
It's
Karen?
different on a laptop where the.
Oh,
stuff-
look at Peter. He put on a collared sweat shirt and a nice shirt.
Can you guys hear me? It's Kathleen Stowe.
I can hear you, Kathleen.
I can hear you, but
Awesome.
see you.
We can't see you.
Oh, okay, let me see. I don't know if I want you to see me, but hold on.
Wait, you said that was the whole reason to do video was because you were getting dressed for us.
Okay, and then I didn't ever do that, so.
All right, so I'm missing Peter, Cher, and Megan.
No, you got Peter.
Megan's
You got
here?
Peter,
Okay,
sure.
great. Megan's
Yep.
here. Peter, are you here too?
Can you see me, hear me?
Yeah, I see you, Megan, and hear you.
Peter, okay, perfect. Great. All right, it's 7 o'clock. I know this is going to be interesting. So let me start off by thanking everybody for joining what is our first virtual Board of Education meeting. I guess I'll call this meeting to order for the folks that are taking minutes. So the meeting is being conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 7B. Per that order, we're recording the meeting. So for those of you who are on video and don't want to be on video, feel free to turn yourselves off. The meeting will be posted on our website and on our YouTube channel. Yes, the Greenwich Public Schools has a YouTube channel. Before we start, I do want to point out a few things to help us along tonight. One, if you're not the speaker, please mute your phone or you mute your computer. That would be helpful. For those who are unaware, the agenda for the meeting is actually found on our board doc site. You can access that through the Greenwich Public Schools site by going to the Board of Education page, clicking on the blue meetings minutes box, and then once you're in board docs, you'll see the link for tonight. This is a special board meeting, and as such, we're actually not taking public comments tonight, but if you do want to send public comments to the board, you can send an email to all BOE members by sending an email to a single address, which is boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. Again, it's boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. The meeting tonight is actually going to consist of discussion by and among the superintendent, the board members, and I believe, Tony, you've got an external consultant joining us. When people speak, this is Peter Bernstein, by the way, if anybody doesn't know that. When people speak, I'd ask them to state their name each and every time that they speak. That's part of the governor's executive order for virtual meetings. We'll be using the raise the hand function in Zoom. So for those board members, you'll see that at the bottom of the participant list. So if you click on the participant list, you'll see a raise the hand function. That'll let me know that you want to speak. I'd ask that the board members try to keep their comments concise if they can. Just it's a little bit difficult to do this, and for people that aren't on calls all the time, this will be an interesting endeavor for you. For voting tonight, we're going to do a roll call vote. So wait until I actually call your name and ask for your vote so that we can actually have that for our record. And that's about it for the preliminary. So with that, I'd like to actually do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to share my camera. Give me 1 second. Start my video. Hopefully it'll be quick. I actually can't see myself, but hopefully you can see me. So we'll go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. All right. Can we have a motion to approve the meeting agenda? So if one of the board members wants to raise their hand.
So moved.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait. This is Karen. I'm trying to raise my hand. Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's okay.
Before we do that, I wanted to make a motion actually to separate agenda item 3D for the request for interim appropriation. I think we should separate it out by specific asks. I think there are 3 asks in that for special funding, which includes special education, the COVID extra help with respect to resources at the schools, cleanup, et cetera, and then also the stadium bleachers. I think we should vote on them separately.
So we can actually vote on them separately, but because this is a special meeting, we actually can't amend the agenda. But we can actually, because they're listed as an action item, we can take them as 3 different items.
So we can vote on them separately.
Yes.
So does that mean we're agreeing now that we will take them as 3?
Well, that will depend on how the motions are made. So we can take that, we'll take that when we get to that item. So if somebody makes a motion for all of them, someone disagrees and makes a motion to amend, we would take it that way. If somebody makes the motion first to do them individually, we can do it that way as well.
The other item is, Peter, is the item on the Special Education Advisory Committee. At the last meeting, there was a discussion about that, but part of it was agreed that, or the discussion at that time was at this meeting, we would have the opportunity for public comment. So we wouldn't be taking action before we had public comment. Now we are put in the position where this item is put as an action item and we're not taking public comment. So the other—
Peter, when that item comes up, if you want to make a motion to table it until the next meeting, that's fine.
I don't know that I want to table it. I just don't want to make it an action item.
Well,
I don't
it's
mind
on the
further.
agenda. When we get to it, we will take the item up. But right now, I'm looking for a motion to accept the agenda.
No, I was gonna say I'll make the motion to accept the agenda.
Is there a
I
second?
will second it.
Thank you, Joe. All those in favor of accepting the agenda?
Aye.
I don't know how I'm supposed to do
Okay,
this.
I'm going to do this as a roll call because we've messed that up already. So I'm an aye. Kathleen?
Aye.
Karen?
Which I,
Christina Downey?
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Karen Kowalski,
Aye.
Megan Olson,
Aye.
Peter Scher.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So with that, the first discussion item and the only discussion item is an update from the superintendent. So Tony, take it away.
Thank you, Peter. So I really wanted to spend a few minutes just really talking about where we are with the coronavirus. Obviously, we're putting out a lot of information almost every 2 days. With our lunch and breakfast right now, since day one, and then where we were over the end of last week, the state did get a waiver for lunch, which means we're serving anybody who is 18 or younger that's in a household in Greenwich. Initially, the first day or two, it was students who were on the list for free and reduced, but the state changed that. We're averaging 600 to 700 lunches, and we just have done, this was our second day of breakfast, and we're about half of that for breakfast. We're running about 300, but we do expect these numbers to continue to climb, just with some things that are happening economically with our families. I do want to just say also, we're partnering with TAG, the nonprofit, to help us deliver breakfast 3 mornings, which has been really, really a huge help for us. Another question that I'm getting right now that there's really no direction on is the bus contract. So in Greenwich, our busing runs about $50,000 a day. It's a very large contract. And the way that our contract is written, you know, we are having legal review that. By the way it's written, we would expect we wouldn't have to pay that contract, but there is lots of discussion at the state level about how that's going to be handled, what that may look like. So we don't really have direction right now from the state level. Somebody was putting forth legislation that would require districts to pay their contracts. But again, there's lots of different legal opinions that are weighing in on where we think we're going to end up on that. So we don't have that right now. Just for the board to know, just in general overtime, the last couple of weeks, well, a week and a half really, we were in school. We were deep cleaning every single night to keep the doors open. So we did more than 500 hours of overtime, which was a lot to make sure we were ready for kids every day. But this last 2 weeks, because schools are technically closed, we were able to move everybody to just a day schedule and get the deep cleaning done without overtime, which was very helpful in working with the union leaders on that. I also just want to point out I saw a comment just even right before we came on here tonight, you know, with all of the technology equipment we have, why are we not more prepared for distance learning? And we're not allowed by law in Connecticut to have distance learning. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. If we could have been the last couple of years on a snow day practicing like they've done in some states, it might have been a little bit easier, but it's against the law in Connecticut, and they have again given us a waiver and told us now that everybody has to be doing this. So we're really asking for some Herculean efforts from our staff right now and learning a lot of new learning. Another question that I know that it is floating around, and again, I try to address this in my communications. Right now we're closed through April 20th, and that is by the governor's order. However, this week, Monday or Tuesday, and I actually didn't hear it, so I'm saying this second and third hand, one of my staff members heard him on the radio when he was speaking that, in fact, he made a statement we could be closed through the fall. So that has shown up in some news media in different places. There's nothing official attached to that whatsoever. So until we actually get any official news, we're assuming it's still April 20th. But again, we're watching what's going on around the country and know that it could be more challenging than that. Some of the other questions, the first week we surveyed parents and teachers to see how things were going. Our teachers were actually more positive than, our families were more positive than our teachers. Our teachers are being pretty tough on themselves. Some of the challenges is just learning new tools and resources, and especially in grades like K1, 2, where kids are little. And, you know, it's been an interesting kind of 2 weeks in the regard that just a few months ago, we had people who were really worried that we were doing too much screen time with our little ones. And if we really had a lot of screen time with our little ones, they might have been more proficient, but we really don't teach that way. We're hands-on environment. where kids are really active in kindergarten, first grade. So it is tough. And I know if parents that have multiple children, we're listening to how we can adjust and modify, going forward, anything we can do to help teachers and to help parents. Probably some of the other things that I'm sure you're hearing as they're out and about. And again, I try to address these in all of the communications that are going out. We have people that really wanted us to move to something like Zoom that we're using tonight or Google Meets pretty quick. But our teachers, that's not a platform our teachers use. So we have to be very careful that, number one, we have appropriate protocol for teachers, because we work with children, we work with minors, not adults. And we worked with GEA last weekend to give some protocol for teachers, and we did put that out. Some of the teachers are choosing to do some small groups. They were doing it this week. Special ed, actually, some of them started the first week. And in the protocol, it's things like making sure we have norms for students. Are they, make sure that they're appropriately dressed before they go online. And that sounds kind of silly, but we work again with teenagers. Making sure that they're in a good learning spot in their room, that they're dressed, again, appropriately for school type attire. And a lot of these, again, are really their safety and security issues for our teachers. So people don't think about that, because when they use it in their adult life for work, it's used as a very different tool. And if you haven't seen what I sent you tonight, I encourage you to open up the articles that are Zoom bombing that were happening yesterday and today across the country, where they were logging into Zoom and then somebody was Zoom bombing with pornographic video and other things. So that's why we're going slow, and that's why we're being very careful, because our teachers don't have the skill set yet. And we want to make sure that if they're going to use a new tool, that they're comfortable using it. So I just share that with you, and our people that are watching tonight could actually, if you just Google Zoom bombing, you'll see it start to pop up. I also, challenges like with video, we're trying to really help our teachers. We would love for all of our teachers to be able to have a video in the morning that's greeting their students. Some teachers know how to do that, some don't. We're doing a lot of on-demand PD. Our curriculum office has done a good job with that. And one of the challenges for teachers is uploading video. So I happen to have a teacher in my home who's living through this, and the videos he's making are about 7 minutes, and every one of them takes about 40 minutes just to upload it. And that just has to do with the Wi-Fi access. And Wi-Fi right now around the country is slowing down on some of the school platforms as well. So again, I would just share that. And then last but not least, I'll just mention one more thing is we are doing, again, the small groups, protocols, making sure that we're trying to connect personally with children in a really challenging time. But kudos to our teachers, to our families, and to our students. I think this is day number 8, I believe, but they're doing really Herculean efforts, and I think we'll continue. It'll get a little bit easier for us if this does continue, as we learn more about utilizing the tools and the flexibility that we have to make it work for everybody.
Is this Karen Hirsch? I had a quick question for you, or two actually.
Go ahead, Karen.
I had 2 quick questions. When we're talking about things like doing live or video type of education for the classrooms, I know that there are some teachers that are using it and some are not, which is causing a little confusion, and just wanted to just sort of ask to make sure that we do have some sort of consistency across grade levels, or at least, course levels. And the other question I had was, I know I've heard from a lot of special education parents who are saying they're having an even more difficult time, especially when it's some of the education is not being as easily accessed by their children. So I just wanted to see how we're sort of addressing the needs of our special education community.
Yeah, special education, we actually opened up the live the first week for things like small speech groups, for instance. But even with that, we had to get, an attorney opinion before we could do that, because it's a violation of FERPA to have 5 special needs children on the screen where other parents and people can see their children. So we got that sign off. The teachers, the first couple of days, were working on getting consent from parents if they were going to have group sort of activities. And right now we have a lot of individual reaching out where, and just because I get emailed on some of these things where they're doing one-on-one, trying to help them with homework. We are engaging also our paraprofessionals that normally work with children, but I'm not going to say it's going to be the same as when we're in school. I mean, I think we all recognize what our teachers do every day in the physical environment is almost impossible to replicate the humanistic side.
Mm.
And it's definitely harder for some of those services.
Yeah. So just if there's a way to sort of address this continuously as we go along, we wanted to make sure, I just know that a lot of the parents just want to make sure that all the students are be able to access education, even if it's not in the same way they were doing it in the classrooms, at least that they were all, you know, equally being able to access it at home.
Yeah, we're trying really hard with that. And I think, you know, we have a lot of teachers, and again, they have different skill sets according to this, you know, what they teach and also the tools they have at home. That was another challenge is, you know, teachers kind of went home and then school was out, and we had buildings open on the Thursday and Friday, but a lot of teachers technically aren't even set up at home to have, you know, they don't have lighting, they don't have whiteboards. So they're making them. I mean, they're doing some amazing things, but tools and resources wise has been challenging, definitely, I think. But as far as being equal across the district, I think we are really trying hard to do that. We don't have a set standard where you must use video, because some of them still can't. And some of them may be in a household where they literally can't get it to upload. But that's a goal for us going through next week, is trying to have more live or video where kids can see their teacher. And I think that was probably a challenge this first kind of 9 days, 8-9 days.
The last thing I just wanted to say is thank
Can
you
I-
so much, because you have really been incredibly communicative with everybody, and to thank our teachers, because we know that this is these are new waters that we are entering, and everybody's been really doing a fantastic job. And I know we still have kinks to work out, but thank you so, so, so much for the direction that you're giving all of our students in our schools.
Thank you.
All right, Karen Kowalski,
Nope. Did I hit a button?
you did your hand up, but that's okay. I think Peter, you were next.
Yeah. Tony, I guess I appreciate the update. To be candid, a lot of it, I mean, I know we've only been in quarantine for whatever you said, 8 days. We've been out of school for 8 days. But we were discussing this for 2.5 weeks at least before we went into quarantine. I remember being in a meeting of the strategy committee with you, where I know I told you that I had heard from our political contacts in Hartford 10 days before the governor put us into quarantine, that he was going to put us into quarantine. So I appreciate, you know, everybody is having to adapt as we go along. I think I guess my question for you is, I still hear the challenges, and they're the same things in the same order you were talking about 3.5 weeks ago, actually, because I was just looking at my notes. The first thing you talked about was meals. The very first time we talked about it, that was the first thing out of your mouth was meals. I guess bus contract is new. But then, you know, there was this discussion about teachers and the union, and they're at home, and so on and so forth. I guess my question is, by what date, for what grades and what courses will we be delivering online direct instruction, either pre-recorded or live via video? When should we expect that will be done consistently across the district? The other reason I'm bringing this up, Tony, is I don't think the public buys this at all. And the reason I say this is we have a technology specialist, full head count, in at least one, in every single school in the district. And their exclusive job is to support teachers with digital learning technology, which we've made a more than $20 million investment in that over the past few years as a district. I realize all this happened before you were here. So all of these technology platforms we have, kids have this stuff. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I think we need to get very clearly a plan with a set of dates and expectations that can be properly set with the community. Because to continue the plan we're on, and I think I said this, I know I said this 3 times before we were put in quarantine. I don't think, to the degree that I know people in Greenwich, the community will always come together with a crisis like this. They did it during 9/11. I lived here during 9/11. You know, we've done this numerous times, but eventually they're going to expect, and I'm already seeing in all the emails I'm getting, I'm seeing in phone calls from people I'm getting, they're willing to want to see what's the plan. And parents, we cannot continue down a path of educating kids in Greenwich. I can't worry about the rest of the state, where it's essentially homeschooling. We're providing teaching materials to parents. We're expecting parents, or we're expecting students to learn the material themselves with remote access to a tutor, a teacher, and typically only during certain times of the day. And I think that was fine for the first phase, but the real question is, when exactly is the next phase going to start, where direct instruction is provided, either pre-recorded or on technology like Zoom or Google Hangouts or RingCentral or Cisco WebEx or whichever platform? When exactly, by grade, by subject, will that begin? What is your target?
My answer to that is probably not what you want to hear, because we are in a national emergency right now, and people have to understand that. We're not going to replicate through distance learning what our teachers do in the classroom. And I'm not going to give you a false date that is not realistic, because doing live lessons, recorded lessons, when it takes 40 minutes to upload a 7-minute video at people's houses. You know, we have a senior administrator who did a book talk the other day, took almost 5 hours to upload that from home. We cannot have our teachers in the buildings. We can't open our buildings and have access to, you know, higher level technical equipment. We're not an online school. And I think that's being honest. I think you need to really—
Tony, with all due respect, there are other districts in Fairfield County who are already down this path. West Hill High School, as an example, is already delivering online lessons. I would encourage you to go talk to your peers. These are school systems that don't have nearly the technology investments that we do. I think everyone understands is that there will be challenges. We're all living with them. You know, those of us who are, I realize we said teachers, oh, how difficult for them to work at home. Guess what? All of America is working at home. So everyone is familiar with these challenges and facing them. I just think we need to have a more specific plan than the public is expecting a more specific plan. And my best advice to you as the superintendent of schools is, I think you need to prepare that we will not be in school for the remainder of this year. And you need to move incrementally from where we are to a place where we're providing direct instruction. There will absolutely be hurdles, difficulties, challenges. We have lots of technology staff. We have all of our building librarians who are assigned to work on technology. We have all of the technology specialists in each school. You've got a staff on a help desk under the CIO. I've said this many times before. There's lots of people in Greenwich who I'm sure have children in Greenwich Public Schools. And if the school system doesn't know how to do it, I'm sure we have lots of people who work in information technology, chief information officers who would be glad to lend some of their time to volunteer, given that we're in a national crisis and we need to be educating children.
And I, again, I appreciate that, Mr. Scher, and I can't give you another answer other than right now, what we really need is the support of our teachers who are being asked to work from their homes. Their own children are also at their feet. Everybody's trying to work from home. So if we want teachers to take leave of absence to look after their own children, we have 0 substitutes right now. So I do think we have to be incredibly respectful that they are learning. They're learning all types of new ways of teaching. We don't lecture all day to children. That's simply not what happens in our schools. We're very hands-on and we pride ourselves with that. So this is a challenge for us. And for a lot of those schools that had their kids on Zoom today, they also saw porno and saw inappropriate language happening on the screen. We're trying to make sure that doesn't happen to our children. And I know that you may not want to hear that, but again, I'm going to do this.
Tony, it's
All right, you know
real,
what,
but
Peter,
let's
I'm
not
sorry.
make,
Peter,
let me just finish this.
Peter,
Let somebody
you're
stop.
asking,
want to speak.
you let her finish the answer, please. You're asking very long-winded questions. Let her at least have 2 minutes to answer them.
So what I really want to say is we are doing our very best. We have some of the best teachers in the country, and I can guarantee you right now, they are working 12 and 15-hour days. They're getting up early. They're trying to upload those videos, and we have a whole team of technical people who are looking at different platforms. We've also had Google slowed down today, of all platforms. You know, it's because everybody in the country is using it. For school, we're on a school platform. We're not on the business side of things. Schoology has slowed down this week. We have other applications we use in elementary where they just crashed for an hour and a half. So I think when some of the companies are also working to help, I think, on their back end to make sure that their products can run really efficiently as well. So we're all learning and growing with this. And I think our teachers are doing some amazing work, and they want a video. They want to be with their kids. And we will continue to get better.
Right,
And,
Kathleen.
and on the parent side as well. That's working together.
Right, Kathleen.
Hi, Kathleen Stowe, Board of Ed, because I guess I'm supposed to announce myself. First of all, hello, everyone. It's nice to see everyone healthy. I think that's what we should probably start leading with, because these are scary times for not just our children, but also us. And it's just nice to see all of you. So Tony, it's been a perfect level of communication from you, because one of the things I will always hear being in the community is, I don't know enough, or what's happening. And you've been so transparent with everyone, and it's appreciative because it sort of calms the anxiety when you're constantly telling the community and the parents what's going on. I relate to all of these things you've been saying. I mean, this household are 2 parents working from home, 3 kids, doing distance learning every day. And this is our new normal, right? And my kids, I have to admit, the first couple of days, my work suffered because I had to guide my children a little bit. But week 2, I am rocking and rolling, and they're rocking and rolling. And let's face it, my middle school kid, the middle school and high school kids, they're more technologically adept. Their teachers are more technologically adept. Nothing, no assistance needed. Speaking with his friends as well, no assistance needed. My elementary kids, sure, they took a little more time. A 2nd grader and a 4th grader, the 2nd grader the most. I mean, exactly what you said. But again, today, week 2, I'm not involved. And so it just shows that every day we're getting better. I'm also speaking to people around Connecticut in towns very similar to Greenwich, but not as big, frankly, but of the same level of affluence. And they're asking me, can you tell me about what you guys are doing? Because we're not quite there. So I actually think Greenwich is leading, and but I agree with all the things too that we're hearing from parents in the community of where we can improve. And that's what every day we have to improve, right? We did that in our pre-corona world, and we'll have to do that in our post-corona world. So thank you. And thanks for all 169 participants who are joining tonight. I think everyone's just probably happy to hear other people's voices. But just keep on rocking and let us know how we can help you as a board.
All right, Megan.
Megan Olson, Board of Education. I just unmuted myself. First of all, Tony, thank you, because you have kept up the level of communication. I agree that it's a great level of communication. I I also am in this unique position where I know what it's like to be a teacher in a school right now in these unprecedented times in another school. You could probably hear right now that my 3-year-old has come in 4 times so far in the beginning since we began this meeting, and hopefully bedtime will be soon. But it is my turn.
And I will be my turn.
So it is.
Yes, it should be your
I
turn.
think that you've done a really great job. I was impressed with how quickly Greenwich Public Schools got up and running with the online learning. I also echo Karen Hirsch's sentiments a bit about the consistency between schools, and I know there's probably some kinks that need to be worked out. Just to share a bit about what I'm doing as a teacher, our schools are requiring 3 hours a week of office time, and that could be whether it's some platform, whether Zoom or Google Hangouts, but a way for the students to be able to connect, especially those younger students, to be able to connect with the teachers, but also to be able to connect with their peers face to face, which does a lot for their social emotional learning in addition to their academics. So kudos to you for the work you've put into this. I think we're being unduly harsh right now on some of us are being unduly harsh on Tony Jones right now in terms of what goes into this and what it's like to be a teacher from home, especially the younger the children, the maybe more difficult it just might be, not to mention all the parents with children with special needs that are, and I do see that the schools are doing what they can, but I think more does need to be done there to be able to help our special education students as well. But I just want to say thank you for what you've done thus far in very difficult times.
Thank you.
All right, Christina.
Christina Downey, Board of Ed. Tony, I also want to thank you for the Herculean effort you've put in and your calm, thoughtful, organized demeanor that's come through in every meeting and certainly in every email that you've sent out. And I think that's been really good for parents and the community. Your tone that you've set is a great leadership style. And I agree that I think this is a learning curve for everyone. My 2 concerns, and I'm sure you're addressing them, would be the consistency element, right? What we're doing from one school to another. And I'm sure the teachers will figure out, or methodology that what's one teacher at OG is doing great that maybe could be shared, and maybe there needs to be some accommodation to the schedule to have that kind of professional back and forth. I'm sorry, my dog of course decided to start barking now. So that would be like one thing that I think, and I'm sure you're on top of it, and there's a lot, I think flexibility is kind of the hallmark now for everyone, for the staff, for the parents, for the kids. So that's number 1. And number 2, I think the notion of that we've seen in some of the emails is the connections, that people want to have the connections. And I think those will come through, whether it's video check-ins X number of times a day, week, for both the staff and for the kids. So those are the things. I think we're moving there. Again, it's only day 8. So I applaud all the efforts that have been done. Of particular note, I have to say, as we get our Board of Ed emails, particular applause, I think, for the Old Greenwich principal, Jen Benz. I totally am going to destroy her name, but she sends those great emails that the board gets, and I'm sure the whole Old Greenwich community gets. And this is to my consistency point. She's doing an amazing job with those, and she sends like thoughts for the day and ideas. And if she shared that with the other elementary school principals, I think people would really find a lot of value in those, or maybe it's, they take turns and someone sends it to all the elementary schools, or whatever methodology you want to use. But I have found those to be particularly impactful. So thank you to her, to you, and to all the staff for really doing your best in what's a very difficult situation that no one, while you were preparing for it a couple weeks ago, you don't prepare for this in the span of a couple weeks on a dime. So thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Kowalski. Karen Kowalski, I think your mic is still muted if you wanted to speak.
Thank you. So many buttons and a new program. Excuse me. So Tony, I wanted to say, the communication has been helpful. I have to say that for a while I was on communication overload with respect to the number of emails between you, the teachers, the principals. I couldn't keep up with it all. In fact, had missed things, particularly pajama day. But by the way, every day is pajama day. But one of the things I do appreciate all of the work that's gone into this. I think the teachers are doing what they can, and we're all trying to survive in what has now become the new norm, which is, we've had to get used to it very quickly. My overarching concerns are a couple of things. One, I would like to have more feedback on what our plan is going forward. How do we, if we need to be prepared to manage school through the end of the year, right? Our kids are not going back. How are we going to do that, right? What are the steps that are going to be taken, and what are the expectations that parents should have, particularly for their students? Obviously, I think high school teachers are, from what my feedback is, they are putting some videos out for their students and teaching new lessons. But is the expectation, particularly for those kids versus middle school versus elementary school, are we going to maintain the status quo of where they're at from learning material, or how do we plan to teach them new content and new skills? Obviously, this can be easier at the higher levels because they can download a video, or they can look at something, or the teacher can give them an explanation on paper. But you're talking about kindergarten through third grade, fourth grade, even fifth grade, right? That learning of new content. How is that going to be done, right? It's not going to be, here's new math problems, do it. And so is the expectation, and what is the plan for those teachers to provide that new content? I think videos is probably a great way, if they can upload a video or hold a class so that they can have access to their teacher to teach them. Or are we going to be relying on the parents to teach them this new content? Or third, is the expectation that we're just going to maintain the status quo, right? We've learned all that we're going to learn, and now we're just going to give them assignments so they don't lose ground, right, on what they have. I think that needs to be put out there, because that is the concerns that I've heard, and my concerns also as just a general parent. So I think that needs to come out more clearly. I know that the special ed teachers have been using Zoom and other methods to reach out to those kids, and I think that's an example of it's working, right? They've figured it out, and I've heard from multiple parents that it's working. Their kids are getting the time and attention they need from their special ed teachers, from whether it's speech and reading and writing. So if they're getting it right, why can't we start expanding it out, however, gradually or however, to the next group of kids, to give them all the opportunities? I think it's great we've gotten to some of the special ed kids, but if we can do them, then my question is, and my dog is now barking too, why can't we do the rest of them? And what do we need to do to bridge that gap? I realize the general population of 9,000 is certainly larger than the general population of the special ed kids, but we're doing it, so we're doing something right. We should be able to extrapolate. So I think my two general comments, and just summing up, is I think we do need a plan. We need to know what that plan is, and particularly if we're going to be out of school for the rest of not in the classroom for the rest of the year, and what the expectations are for both teachers, students, and parents to educate kids, because this is going to be a communal effort at this point, more so than it ever was before. And I think we just need to have that out there.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Hi, Joe Kelly here. Tony, we're in, as everyone's aware, we're in an emergency situation. And the most important thing in an emergency situation is to keep a cool head. We have to keep the wheels on, and you're doing so. So well done as far as that goes. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on how we could do what we're doing better. What I like to make everyone understand is we're all ears right now to hear what we could do that's going to improve the situation we're in right Karen Kowalski makes a great point about looking forward and all working together and putting a plan together so we could actually get through this. It's all uncharted territory. None of us have been here before. I'm getting a little too much criticism where really at this point, people should be sending us emails and contacting us about suggestions on how to better the situation. I know with my personal situation at home with my, my freshmen, it's a variety of experiences with each teacher. Some are connecting with Zoom or other vehicles, and they have really fun experiences. Others are a little distant. So I think it was Karen Hirsch who mentioned some degree of consistency between teachers. That's one thing we certainly have to work on. We have to make sure everybody understands that the product that we're putting out right now as a school system is less than the product we have when we're in the schools. And Tony, I believe you mentioned that at the beginning, and people have to keep that in mind. So the consumer, the families are going to have to understand that the product is just not going to be as good, but we have to make it as good as possible. So please, as a community, we have to make sure we communicate and work together to try to solve and better the situation. It's going to be a teacher by teacher. It's going to be family by family. We're going to need, as a family, to support our kids where once before the teachers and the students' friends would create a support structure. We need now to understand that our families need to do this support structure that they once had with the teams, with camaraderie at school. That's now on the families to make sure we create that, because we're in a situation that just never happened before. This quarantine, the situation that we're in, we don't know how long it's going to last, but the families have to contribute just like the teachers have to contribute, just like the whole community has to contribute. So reach out. We have to communicate with our families and have them reach out and ask them what sort of help they need and offer that help as a community. But also please understand that, and I believe that the teachers are under a whole lot of pressure. They want to perform, they want to do well, they want the experience to be just as good as it is when the kids are in school, but that's going to be hard to achieve, certainly in the early stages. So as far as a forward plan goes, communication amongst the board, we should be communicating more about a plan that we think could work due to the feedback we get from the community. We have to talk to the community, reach out. If they're not reaching out to us, we have to reach out to them and find out what their experience is like, gather that amongst the board, and then suggest that to the superintendent and stay in communication with Tony as far as that goes. So there's a lot on our shoulders, and we have to make those phone calls and stay in touch with the community and find out what we need to do to improve. And Tony, we have to be flexible, as you've proven to be so far, and adjusting to the situation as we progress. So it's a fluid situation, and we all have to work together. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I'm just going to say this.
Can you announce yourself though, please?
Yeah, this is Peter Scher from the Board of Ed. I appreciate everything everyone's saying. And for those 180 people who are sitting on the phone listening, I appreciate everybody coming out to hear what's going on and what the Board of Education is doing to make sure that children across Greenwich are being educated. I appreciate the update, Tony. I appreciate the communications. My frustration with this, and I encourage everyone to go back, because our meetings are on GoLine. Go back and look at our last 2 meetings. Go back and look at the discussion that the board had about this issue and how we were going to prepare for what we knew was coming and what we've been able to do. And I find, which is my source of frustration because I keep notes, I'm hearing the same thing I heard in the last 2 meetings. And I'm hearing lots of objections about what can't be. And I'm very interested to hear, Tony, what the plan is going forward, when things will be, and rather than a list of difficulties and objections. Of course there are difficulties and objections. Of course this is difficult for everyone. I'm just concerned at the speed and pace, and I always talk about speed and pace, that the school system is adapting. Of course it's difficult. I'd like to hear a plan, and this is the 3rd update where I've heard the challenges but I haven't heard the goal, the vision of what we're trying to get to clearly so that we can communicate it to the public. And I haven't heard a tentative plan to get to that goal. And showing up, Tony, in some teachers are out there doing it, others are not. Students are having very inconsistent experiences. My daughter, as an example, is at the high school. Based on the 5 different subjects she has, it's a very different experience. It's very different expectations, nothing to do with teachers and training, as an example. Some people require homework to be delivered within a certain period of time. Others require it to be delivered during a different period of time. Why there isn't a standard, and I hear parents asking me this, and I can't tell them I know why. Those are the kinds of things I think we have to put on a list, knock it down one at a time. And of course, this entire process is going to be filled with challenges and frustrations. I just think we need to get to a place now where, as a district, the public is asking for a more clear roadmap and a more clear plan, what they should expect, with the presumption that schools will be closed from now through to June or July. If it gets better, hallelujah. If we're able to reopen, hallelujah. I think we need to be, as a board, providing the leadership, setting the direction, and for you, Tony, so that you're not out there on your own trying to figure out what's acceptable to the community. But at the same time, you coming to us and saying, here are the obstacles, and here's exactly what I need from you to overcome that obstacle, board. Help me clear these obstacles away. And unfortunately, I'm not hearing that yet, but I hope by the time we have the next board meeting, you'll be in a position to more clearly articulate that to the parents of the 9,000 students of Greenwich Public Schools.
Ms. Hirsch?
Oh, I just wanted to sort of reiterate. I mean, I've heard from parents, not just all throughout Greenwich and Connecticut in general, but I have friends all around the country, and we're all navigating the same bumpy path. And I know most people are kind of amazed at actually what we've gotten to be able to do in such a short window of time, as we were training our teachers and closed the same, found out we were closing the same day. So I think, other than try to figure out some consistency, maybe some teachers sharing videos that they've already made with other classes, I think one of the big pieces that we're missing, and I think maybe we can consider, is how we connect our children. They're home, they're isolated. It is a big thing for health and, our students' health and wellness. Part of the big piece of our making learning personal is making sure that our students are connected and working together. So maybe that is sort of a piece that we can try to figure out a way to work on, so that our students do not feel so isolated at home and they still have that connectivity. But beyond that, I really do think that, we have gotten so far so quickly in a world that nobody expected to happen in such a short window. And I know we're so far ahead of most other districts in Connecticut. And I consistently hear thanks from parents overall for everything that we are doing. And I know you'll work this bumpy road out for us. So thanks again.
Okay, so this is Peter Bernstein. I want to echo a lot of what's been said. Tony, I think you and the team, the staff, have been doing an amazing job given the circumstances. I have friends and colleagues globally. I've talked to many of them, especially in Asia. And, this is the path, right? Not the path of the virus, but the path of how education has gone. Basically, it is an iterative process. It's as you've described it. We are starting out, not every teacher's got the resources at home. I get all of that. And I I completely commend you for continuing to work with the staff, continuing to work with the teachers union to find other ways to connect with students. Tomorrow we have the Flexible Friday. I know for both of my kids, we got emails from the teachers if they want to meet with the kids, if we have questions for the teachers. I think the level of communication across the board has been amazing. You've been amazingly transparent with the community, and I think it's really, really helpful. I'm also communicating with board chairs across the state, and what I will say is we're leading the pack. We were the first district to get the waiver for distance learning before the state decided that everybody ought to do it much later than we did. This isn't a ship you turn on a dime. It never has been. It probably never will be, but we are so far ahead. I think people are mistaking digital learning for distance learning, and I think that's something that we need to understand. We are amazingly lucky in this community that the community supported the one-to-one devices. That's something that the town has paid for, the people of the town have paid for. And that means that every student has a device. We've made sure every student has connectivity. We are so far ahead in that people do not understand that. But there's going to be variation on what the kids are getting. There's variation in classrooms. You can have two teachers teaching the same subject next to each other, and you're going to have variation. So I don't want that to be lost in this. The other is there's a lot of positive stories out there. There's a lot of teachers that are being very, very creative. They're doing book reads and videos at the elementary level. One of my kids, the math teacher, is actually filming herself working through problems. You see her hand on the page. You see the work as it happens. She pauses, talks through why she did what she did. There's iteration going on all the time. There's learning going on all the time. Our teachers are you know, they're deluged by demands of their own lives at home, just as we all are, and yet they're doing their jobs, and I think we really need to respect that. I really appreciate that you surveyed the community after week one, and that you have been changing things since then, and you will continue to do so. So I think that is just the right path. The teachers have been amazing. When the students are emailing, they're getting right back to them. I mean, there is good flow of communication. I just think we're in a place where it's easy to point out problems. It's harder to find solutions. Just keep moving forward, keep pushing forward. I think what you and the teachers, the administration are doing is exactly right. When you talk about what the role is for the board, we actually have a pandemic policy, believe it or not. It's something we voted on last year, and it talks about what the superintendent's role is in providing an alternative means of education, not the board's role. Now, I think it's right that we share the feedback we get from the community, we share our own experiences, because quite honestly, the students are probably better situated to give that feedback than anybody. I know you pulled the teachers, you pulled the parents, maybe at some point, maybe pull the students, because I think that might be helpful. But stay the course, continue to iterate, continue to get better. But we really need to recognize how far ahead we are. This is not digital learning, folks. This is a whole new method of learning. And by the way, when we come out on the other end of this, I think our teachers are going to be so much better at what they do, because they're being creative now. They're being amazingly creative, and they're challenging themselves to get better. And it's exactly what we want of our students, and they're modeling that behavior. So with that, Tony, I'll just say thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which I believe is the Western Middle School Voluntary Remediation Action Plan. Given it's an action item, can we get a motion to put it on the table? I guess maybe I'll make it easy on us and I'll put it on the table.
Oh.
And I can second. This is Karen Hirsch. I'll second it.
Go ahead, because I don't have it up in front of me because I've got my computer screen. You want to go ahead and make the motion?
Hey,
Me?
Peter.
Karen?
Peter, I think Karen Kowalski might have fallen off for a second. If you want to wait a second, have her come back on.
Well, let's put the motion on while she's doing it, and then we can talk about it at that point.
Yeah, I just came back. I got booted off and now I'm back again. I don't know what the motion is.
Okay, so Karen Hirsch, go ahead and make your motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve moving the Western Middlefield remediation project forward by voluntarily joining the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's voluntary remediation program, which is under CGS section 22A-133X as presented at our March 5th board meeting.
I'll second that just for sake of ease. It's Peter Bernstein. Discussion, Dr. Jones.
Yes, I think Ryan Rolstrom with Langdon is also on tonight, so we should be able to hear from him if you have any questions. The one outstanding question from when we discussed this at the last meeting was if we enter the program, could you at some point withdraw? And my understanding, and I will let Ryan, if he's on, just clarify, is that you could because it's voluntary, but it would be a kind of an odd thing to do because it wouldn't really help, or it wouldn't really help to actually withdraw because you're still working with the same group of people. But again, Ryan, if you're on, I'll defer to you.
Yes, this is Ryan Woolstrom with Langen Engineering. Thanks, Tony. I can elaborate a little bit on that. Yes, you can voluntarily remove your enrollment into the voluntary remediation program. However, only if the town was willing to proceed with a remedy that was compliant with the RSRs, meaning a 4-foot cut across the site. As Tony suggested, there really is no benefit of removing yourself from the program because, and I spoke to Jane Warren with McCarter and English earlier today about this topic. It's really a legal issue, but we spoke with Jane. You're likely going to be hit with a consent order by the state if you choose to withdraw, which means you're still going to be complying with the DEP's request for whatever they need to do to move this forward to remediation. So in summary, yes, you can voluntarily remove, but that probably wouldn't change things for the Western Middle School.
Oh, Karen Kowalski, do you have a question?
I do. So forgive me if the question has been previously asked, but I don't. What is the benefit of going into the voluntary program?
The benefit is that it provides a mechanism for the state, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, to review and opine on our investigation and remedial action work plans. Currently, there's no formal process for them to be involved with the remediation planning. By entering the program, it allows the state to weigh in, which also allows the EPA to approve the forthcoming remedial action work plan. So it formalizes the remedial process. It puts us into a program where we're fully required to abide by the Connecticut remediation standards or RSRs.
But wouldn't we have to do that anyway, whether or not we enter into the voluntary program? Wouldn't we have to comply with, the EPA and other environmental regulations within the state of Connecticut and federal laws?
That's correct. The issue is we're trying to ask the state to review and opine on our data and provide maybe some guidance on the proposed remedy. They, as of right now, are unwilling to do so because we're not formally in a program. By entering the program, it allows them to assign a project manager, and that project manager can coordinate with us to design the proper investigation and remediation.
So do we relinquish control over what remediation plan we ultimately decide?
We still have the control to propose remedies. They ultimately, the site ultimately deferred to a licensed environmental professional or LEP. However, that doesn't mean the state chooses the remedy. We propose options. Each of those remedies will be protective of public health and the environment. However, the ultimate choice will be, or the proposed remedy will be up to the town.
Ryan, this is Peter Bernstein. Just wanted to follow up on that. If I understand it though, the remedy under the voluntary plan could be anywhere from 0 to 4 feet. Basically, without the voluntary plan, you're talking about having to do the 4 feet cut, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Peter Scher?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm unlike Peter and Karen, I'm not an attorney. So, but at the last meeting, I raised a question. That's this question we're trying to answer. When you originally presented to us, I don't know, 2-3 meetings ago, The presentation was, here are the options for Western Middle School. I believe you presented 4 options. I could be wrong. Each of them went from higher projected cost to lower projected cost. And as I recall, in each one of those options, you get to a lower projected cost by gaining waivers to existing regulations, either from the federal EPA or the Connecticut Department, DEEP, correct?
That's correct. For some of the lower cost remedial options, we would need
waivers.
variances from both state and federal regulations.
Regulations, okay. So our hope was, right, we would get to, I forget what the number is, for some reason I have 16 million in my head. 16 million, but it was the lowest cost option, lowest projected cost option, I should say. And, but it required a whole bunch of waivers, right?
The lowest cost option was actually closer to 6 million. It was an option that had a low likelihood of being approved by both the state and DEP.
Okay.
But that's correct. The lower cost options each required there's different levels of variances requested, but yes, other than alternative number 1, which was remove everything, each would require a variance.
Right, and remove everything and cart it all away didn't require any variances, right?
That's correct.
And what was the projected cost for that?
About 23 million.
$23 million to cart it all away. Okay.
Correct.
My question was, though, is that you had suggested at that meeting, if I recall properly, and please just straighten me out, that the way to proceed was to enter this voluntary program, but that the voluntary program was a relatively new thing as far as the state of Connecticut was concerned, and that if I understood you properly, there weren't a lot of people who had successfully navigated through getting to remediation through this voluntary program. I understood that, in fact, we were one of the first, and we were trying to do it to manage the remediation at Greenwich High School. Was that correct?
Not entirely.
Okay, straighten me out, please.
Entering the program is by no means a new concept in the state. The program's been around for over 20 years and many sites have been in and out of it.
Okay.
What I was referring to as relatively new in the state and where we're kind of the pioneers is we're trying to leave PCBs in place at a school site in Connecticut. Based on what we've heard from the state and EPA, there's no school site in Connecticut that has had that approved previously.
And that's what we're trying to do at Greenwich High School, leave the PCBs in the ground. And I guess, I hesitate to use the word safe, remediate them by putting some kind of barrier between these toxic materials and people, children, correct?
That's right. Each of the alternatives you're essentially trying to limit exposure and being protective. So
okay.
You're removing a certain level of contaminants and backfilling with clean material. So you have that barrier between your students, and yes.
So I apologize. I mixed up the two things of the voluntary. I thought we also said that what we were going to try to do, because we were well along this path at Greenwich High School, was to go down this path, see if we could get the approval at Greenwich High School. And then if it was successful, we would use that as a model for Western. That was what we said that was what was said in that meeting when you presented. I just became a little confused when we came to a subsequent meeting, and all of a sudden we were starting down the path with Central on a similar vein. Is there an update on either of those? And, does it matter if we do them simultaneously? I just got confused because the original presentation was do it at the high school, let's see how it works out, and then we'll do Western. So can you help illuminate that?
I can on Western Middle School. I'm not familiar with as the Central or High School. However, what was discussed was once the high school gets their RAP approved by the state, now while both sites are different in their own ways, we would try to use portions of that approved remedy to tailor and refine our remediation strategy
At Western.
at Western. What I mean by that, and again, both sites are different, for artificial turf fields at the high school, they're
Mhm.
doing a 1 foot cut.
Of
So-
dirt, you mean?
1 foot, for 1 foot of cut of dirt, and then the protective barrier post remediation would be turf. So
Mhm.
we use that same strategy. We just for comparison purposes, we evaluated how much would that cost at the Western Middle School.
And that number's $6 million.
No, for artificial turf, you're doing what? I think it was 8.7 million.
8.7. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, I understand. Okay, I'm sorry. I got mixed up and I tried to ask this question at the last meeting to get clarified. So we were kind of bumping around in the dark. I appreciate your clarification. Helps tremendously.
Very happy to help. And just one final clarification. I did say earlier that DEP and EPA are maybe not unwilling to work with us recently. That's not meant. They've been working with us all along. Just the VRP, the Voluntary Remediation Program, does provide the state with a form mechanism to work with us.
And this is Peter Bernstein. I just want to clarify, the soil at Central is clean. The test results came back positive, so don't want to leave that hanging out there. So I think it's the high school in Western that we're dealing with on not exactly parallel tracks. Any other discussion from board members? All right, so hearing none, we'll take a vote. The action is to move Western Middle School remediation project into the voluntary remediation program. So I'm going to take a roll call vote. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes, anything to get this going.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Absolutely.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That passes unanimously. So I guess given the circumstances, we'd like to get that submitted as soon as we can. I'm sure you're going to need some autographs.
Understood.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the amendment to the 2019-2020 school calendar. Dr. Jones, and if we could mute our mics if we're not talking.
Given the situation that we're in with distance learning, obviously, we wanted to get information from our teachers, from our families about adjusting spring break. There were a couple of concerns about continuing with spring break, and one of those being that our students are in a routine, they're logging on every day, and especially with our teenagers, they really don't have a lot to do during the day now that even the beaches and fields and everything is closed. So in surveying the community, I actually just closed the survey probably 5 minutes ago, and we ended up with 3,750 responses, and we were just above 80% want to modify the calendar, which means we would be off on Good Friday, off on the following Monday, so it'd be a little bit of a long weekend, and then have distance learning the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And again, it was an 80-20. Our teachers, GEA also did a similar survey with their teachers just to see if just the teachers group alone had the same thinking, and they were 85%. So when it was just teachers, they were even just a little bit higher. But it was a very strong, I felt like strong input, getting 3,750 people to respond.
Thank you. Since this is an action item, I'll go ahead and make the motion and then we'll ask for a second. So it's Peter Bernstein. The motion is to amend our April break calendar so that we would have Good Friday off, the Monday following Good Friday, and the rest of the week would be educational days.
I will second it.
Mr. Kelly with the second. Discussion. And just ask you to raise your hands. Mr. Scher.
Tony, what is our expectation for any parent who may not have their kid in school on that week we had planned to be off anyway?
If they didn't have,
I mean, my kids are going to be in school. I think most people's kids are going to be in school. The reason for my question is I think, for the parent who does remove their kid from school, given the circumstances, I'd hate to see us trying to penalize parents. through attendance policies and the rest of it. But I don't know what the plan is. So I'm curious what your thoughts were on that.
So that's a tricky question. If we modify the calendar, technically, if they didn't log on at all that week, they would be counted absent. However, the state has also not clarified for schools what they're going to do about attendance. Grades are also sitting out there right now. And about an hour before this meeting, I got a response from the commissioner that they hope before April 20th that they will actually weigh in on that. But our spring break would have been over. So, you know, some districts aren't really doing distance learning. They're just doing supplementary learning. So they're not taking attendance at all. And usually it's a requirement by the state. So the way that we would manage that is we would work with the families. If they already had a family trip, certainly students can still log on if they want to, if something was crucial in an AP class or there's something they really needed to do, we would work individually with families if it was going to cause a hardship.
I think, Tony, my point would be is we have pretty rigid attendance and accepting of work standards at the high school. Middle schools less so, even less so at elementary schools. I think I've said this before, I'll just say it one more time. I know we're, as a Board of Education, obligated, we're an organ of the state of Connecticut. But at the same time, I'll underline, you know, the community in Greenwich cares most about their kids. They care a lot less what Hartford thinks. I would think you might look at, particularly at the high school, if that situation arises, I think we should be relaxing whatever attendance standards, because that's, by the way, a school-based decision. That's something Ralph can decide. The attendance standards and the loss of credit standards and the when you have to send back work, those are fully delegated from the board to you as the superintendent. Then it has traditionally been delegated from the superintendent to the buildings. So that's probably the one area that has a potential sticking point for that. If there is that parent out there who is planning on taking their kid out of schools, I can't imagine there would be, but if there is, I just would hate to see those families, given the situations we're all in and the hardships everyone's under, to have any kind of penalty.
Yeah, we've already turned off. They used to get, if you reached your 10-day notification, you would get that automated letter about your attendance. That's already been turned off in Aspen. Just attendance in general online is a little bit different. The headmaster has also been working with his staff on those like due dates and things of that nature. They're trying to be much more flexible than they were 3 or 4 days ago, just given some of the family circumstances. So we absolutely will continue to work with our families.
All right, Ms. Olson.
Yeah, Megan Olson. I think it makes a lot of sense to amend the calendar because you know, I've seen even in my own house, the kids, they have a routine. The students get up, they have they're in this routine such that it is they're someone said earlier, it's their new normal. But I think to go ahead and put a break in it when people are, let's face it, not leaving the house, let alone not going away, would not make sense this time. So that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you. Ms. Downey?
I agree with what Megan's saying. They think, and you know, the notion of giving people days off when we're in this circumstances doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of routines and habits and things that'll be helpful to our students. Those extra 4 days could be very helpful and valuable to us come June, depending on how things go, that we will have implemented them. So I think, and also looking at when you do a survey, we don't often get surveys with such strong results in one direction. And I think between the teachers and the parents, I think it's a good indicator of where the pulse of the community is. And while I appreciate Peter's point about attendance at the high school level. I think as a practical matter, you might be talking about 1 or 2 families, you know, in the way the world is now. So I'm not overly concerned about that. And I know you'll work with whoever needs accommodation.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
Same thing. I mean, have you ever had such a great response rate? I guess people are home, so. it's-
Yeah, we have. It's welcome to Greenwich.
All right, seriously, Peter, I know you've talked a lot. Can you give me a second?
Thank you.
So, he just likes to talk. Anyway, it's a great response rate, but more importantly, I'm echoing what Christina said, which is 80–85%. This is a no-brainer. Let's move forward. Thanks.
All right, Karen Hirsch.
Oh, I was going to say the same thing. I had, reached out just to sort of see what the temperature was, and in general, make sure that our kids have some continuity and consistency. It really is going to help them manage anxiety and other things going forward in this new normal. And even more importantly, just to sort of touch upon what Mr. Scher had said, even on our calendars, we always note that April break, days may be taken out of April break if we have snow days and so forth. And families should always be aware that they need to plan for that. So if we can be somewhat flexible, that's great, but it is also already our policy. But with such a strong public response that they want to continue on the path of education as we're doing it, I think it's a no-brainer as well.
So Tony, this is Peter Bernstein. Just wanted to find out where the teachers came out.
The teachers were at 85%. They were even a little bit stronger.
Great, thank you. All right, if there's no other discussion, the motion on the table is to amend April break. So the break would be April 10th, which is Good Friday, and then the following Monday, which is April 13th, with the days April 14th to 17th as school days. All right, I'll take the roll call vote. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher? Peter, are you muted?
I am. Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, that's unanimously 8-0. Thank you very much. All right, the next item is the Special Education Advisory Committee. So before putting this on the table, Peter, I think you had a concern that you wanted to raise.
I was just suggesting that we discuss it. I think we need to wait to approve it because this subject is so, we've heard so much community feedback on special education, particularly over the last year. I would rather we wait until we can have the community chime in on this committee. So I know it's something we'll be setting up for the future, and the committee, I guess, I don't even know how it would be comprised. I think we talked about that last time. I was just suggesting that we discuss it. Lots of people listening, so that's a good thing. But defer voting on it until we can get community comment, whatever mechanism that's done, either online or hopefully will be reopened and in a public meeting opportunity soon.
Do you want to make a motion, Peter?
I can make a motion. I move that this item be changed from an action item to a discussion item.
Well, we can't change the agenda, so the only thing we could do is move it to another meeting.
Why don't we have a discussion, and then afterwards I'll make a motion to move the vote to another meeting, but let's proceed with the discussion first.
Well, just following Robert's rules, I think what we'll do is we'll put a motion on the table to move forward, and then if you'd like, you can make a motion to amend.
Oh, I'll happily make a motion to move forward with this.
Can you state your name, please?
Sorry, Karen Hirsch. I'd be happy to make the motion to approve sorry, I'm in the wrong document, but for the Special Education Advisory Committee to approve the participation as state-supported pilot to form a Special Education Advisory Committee comprised of parents, teachers, and administrators as presented at our March 5th board meeting.
Is there a second? Ms. Downey, I see you have your hand up. You want a second?
Yeah, I'll second. I was trying to unmute at the same time.
All right, so why don't we let Dr. Jones start the discussion and we'll go from there. Thank you.
I think on the special education advisory, and I do want to just say it's really council. We says committee on the agenda, but just so we have the correct name. I think there's a lot of support for it. And I have not had, after the last meeting, I only had positive reach out to me. And I had even somebody today that realized it was on the agenda that wants to be considered, you know, for service, wants to serve on the council. So I think it's a safe one that the board could approve if you're comfortable. What it really means for us is I can start working with the organization to actually start recruiting people who would serve on the council and get that part of the work done. They were supposed to be here obviously tonight, and you know, we're going to be presenting if we were having a regular meeting. But I do think there's great work we could be doing while we're all on this distance kind of position that we're in right now.
Ms. Hirsch.
Oh, just as a reminder, at our last meeting when we discussed this during our professional development meeting, we did have a sense of the meeting to move this forward for a vote at this meeting, at tonight's meeting. And so people, I think, did have an opportunity. It was in discussions then. They've had plenty of opportunity to reach out. All the feedback I've gotten also has been exceptionally supportive. So I just sort of wanted to point that out. I know 2 members were missing at our last meeting. However, it was 6-0 of people that wanted to move this forward at our last meeting.
Ms. Downey.
I believe my recollection from that meeting, maybe Karen will confirm or not, was that we also wanted to even approve it at that meeting if possible, but we said because it was the first time it was coming up, like we were prepared to approve it on the spot. And the only reason we delayed in doing so was to have it be a first read versus an action item. So it doesn't seem like, as to Karen's point, I think it's come up already in a public forum and people have had an opportunity to comment. And given that, I don't think it makes sense to delay it till we can have a full public meeting, which could be some time, when it's something that's worth people, I think the community saying they believe it's worthwhile, and there's been no opposition, and we were wholeheartedly in favor of at our last meeting. So that's between my recollection and my sense, my point of view.
Great. Ms. Olson.
Yep, Megan Olson. I do have some questions and concerns. I feel like there's a lot of unknowns about this committee. I don't know. I think there should be independent members. I don't know the recruitment guidelines. And I do think in this instance that public input would be necessary. So, you know, I think that again, I don't know what the guideline recruitments are. I think it should be completely independent. And so I'm not necessarily comfortable going forward with this at this point. I think that public input in this instance where would be essential.
Dr. Jones, do you want to explain a little bit about that? Because I knew we talked about it at our last meeting, and I know Megan was unable to join us.
Yeah, this is it's a pilot program for the state. So we would be one of a handful of districts that would be implementing this. And they send it's not a consultant. I'm trying to think of the right term, what they call them, but they actually have somebody who works with us the entire year who's, you know, they're not part of Greenwich Public Schools, who help guide the process and really make sure that this is a very balanced, very kind of positive experience. It's half of the committee, the council must be parents. So you get a 50-50 balance. They make sure that the council also is balanced in that you have preschool represented, you have high school, elementary, all different levels. And they guide us through the process from creating the bylaws, how to set the agenda, how Robert's rules operate. So there's actually somebody external really leading us for the first year. And the program right now, it's funded by the state. So there's no cost to the district. And the parents actually, our special education parents brought this forward to me. That's where the idea came from, and they found out about the opportunity. So I think from that perspective, that's positive as well, that it's being brought from our actual special education families that brought it forward.
can I just ask who chooses, Megan Olson, who chooses the members? Is it Mary? Is it you, Tony? Is it independent? Who chooses the members? That's important to me.
We would be working with the consultant on that. And, we talked about this a little bit when they were presenting at the evening meeting. There is a group of parents, again, that brought this forward that would be part of this conversation. In some districts, they actually take applications for people who are interested, and then they look at those applications to make sure the committee's balanced in, again, different ages and disability categories. So it would be making sure that that whole process is part of the whole bylaws, and that's part of what we would be putting together. And the parents that have brought this forward obviously would be at the table helping us, get this off the ground.
Mr. Scher.
Yeah, I think, Megan, I share the same concerns you had. At the last meeting, as you know, it was a meeting where we couldn't take public comment because it wasn't that kind of meeting. It was a retreat meeting. So, and as Ms. Downey said, I agree. The consensus was have this, right? And the consultant who presented, I thought, did a very, very good job at answering the questions. For me, it sounded like a very good idea. And I support it. I think we should do it. I think the more that we can have critical stakeholders in the school system involved and engaged and advising and to some level overseeing, I think that's good. And as you know, there are lots of parents who have, I think, opened at least my eyes to lots of difficulties with special education services in the district. So the more that we can get engagement that moves us in a positive direction, I think that's good. The thing that I haven't heard, though, which is the only reason I'm raising the question about the vote, is I haven't heard from any special education parents, positive or negative. It's like I'm just sitting here with no information. And I'd love to know if another board member has spoken to, as an example, Karen Hirsch, former president of the PTA Council. Where does the Special Education Committee of the PTA Council stand on this, as an example? Or some of the parents who've come to us and told us heartbreaking stories that would just make your skin crawl about what's going on in special education. What's their point of view on it? I'm just interested to understand that. I think the concept and the idea of having community engagement, more community engagement, is brilliant, and I'd like to support it. Karen, do you know where PTAC stands on this?
Peter, we're going to call on people in the order they were called. We will get to Karen. So Karen Kowalski.
Sure, thanks. No, I think Peter and Megan have raised a lot of good questions, and that was my general concern, having unfortunately not been able to attend the last meeting for family issues. My concern on this, without having public comment, and maybe it's just me not understanding completely the program, is how is it supposed to be structured, right? How many people are going to be a part of this committee? How are they selected? What will its goals and agenda be? How will this work in connection with the Key to Ed program that we've already been looking at? How is this something, these goals and bylaws that are going to be set up, is this something that is done once the committee is formed? How many members are on this committee? There's a lot of variables and unknowns, and I'm just curious how this shapes up. I'm also, I think it sounds great, and I think it's going to move us in the right direction for purposes of special ed. But the other issue I have is, what is the involvement of the state, and what do they expect to do? Is this something, given that they're going to be the consultants, are they going to be a driving force in this? And we're going to have a lot of state involvement in how we think the Greenwich special education program should be run? You know, are we going to be butting heads? I don't understand the process. And so that's why I'm a little leery. And I thought some public comment might be helpful here into understanding what this program is, or what this committee is intending to achieve.
Dr. Jones, before I call on anybody else, do you have any answers that you want to provide?
Yeah, so what the council is looking for right now from the state, this is really just about helping the special education community work with the school district. I mean, that really is the whole premise. It's not the state special education department that has any weight whatsoever. It's basically like a grant type program where they're paying for us to have a consultant to be able to have a committee, a council that has multiple stakeholders at the table together, talking about special education issues. What are some things that we could do better? Do we have, elements of our website that could be better? And really this vote tonight is to say, yes, you support that the district move in the direction to start working collaboratively with the special education council that would be bound. And that's really what it is. Then they come in, and it's at that point with our parents, we decide how many members are going to be on the committee. And when they addressed this at our last meeting, for a district our size, over 9,000 students, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood between 15 or 20 people. But again, that's part of putting the whole bylaws together and structuring the committee to be really what Greenwich wants it to be. But they come in and help us do that. And they don't want to utilize, obviously, their funds to come in and start helping us if the board hasn't said they're really interested in making this happen. So it's really, this is the commitment that the board is showing to move in this direction. But we're not going to get all of those elements without a vote.
All right, Ms. Olson.
Yeah, Megan Olson. I do see where this could be a good idea. I guess my thoughts are just that the special education, parents is a very diverse group. And I just don't think that everyone's had an opportunity to be heard, and really not enough information about this has been put to the public, and not enough information from the public has yet been received. So I'm not necessarily not in favor of doing this. I just think that we need more voices, not just a small group, but more voices need to be heard, and a little bit more information needs to come forth to be in favor of doing this. But I'm not necessarily in favor of voting on this right now without knowing more, having more input.
Ms. Hirsch.
Well, I'll start off by answering Mr. Scher's question in regards to where the Special Education Committee of PTA Council is overall. As I've heard from them, they are fully in support of this. Generally, just as an understanding for those who don't know what a SEAC is, our state, Connecticut State Board of Education, Department of Education has a SEAC as well. They are starting to look to have these move forward anyway in every single district. They are mandatory in districts around the country and in other states as well. It is an advisory committee only. They do not make any decisions. They do not make any. They make recommendations, and they work with the Board of Education. There's always a member of the Board of Education, at least one, if not more, sitting on that committee as an advisory member. We do have a policy as a Board of Education anyway on the creation advisory committees that we've been looking at. And this is, again, something that we're looking to, I guess, this had been put on to move forward just to start the creation process. Some of the creation of the bylaws and all of those other questions that you guys are asking, we don't have answers for, because once we start the process, those individuals start to help form some of those decisions as we move forward. We wouldn't know necessarily in advance from all the research that I've done when it comes to looking at SEACs, and I've read SEAC documents from all over the country, that SEACs that have been formed. And again, this is not something they cannot make decisions for us. It's simply an advisory committee to help to help share some information. And when it comes again to PTA Council for their special education committee that they were part of the individuals, one of the chairs of that brought this forward to us, amongst other members of the special education committee, many of who I've heard from as well were very much in support of this. And again, as I mentioned, it is mandated in many, many different states. it's very well supported, I would say. I personally am fully in support, and if any members of the board are interested in looking at documents from all over the country for different SEACs, I'm happy to share them. I've compiled a whole bunch.
Okay, Ms. Downey.
Karen raised some of the points I was going to make, but I just went and pulled out, the beauty being home, I went and pulled out my notes from our March 5th meeting. And I know Megan and Karen weren't there. So, but the notion of it is that this is the creation of a council, an advisory committee, which goal is to have it provide a variety of viewpoints from different stakeholders, many different parent groups, to just give guidance and advice to the board. I think we've talked a number of times about how we really want to improve communication and issues in the special ed community. And while I appreciate usually the need for public comment, I think this is, to me, a bit of a no-brainer, particularly when some special ed parents brought it to Dr. Jones, as well as the fact that there will be an opportunity for public input in the application for who is going to be on it, in terms of the bylaws, in terms of the goals. There's a whole, the template of what this committee would do has yet to be fully vetted. So we're just saying we're starting the process at this point and getting the people in line who want to participate and see how big a subscription we want to have and get the ball rolling, as opposed to waiting a number of meetings or time period before we even move things along. So.
Mr. Scher.
Karen, thanks very much for quickly getting that out of PTAC. That's helpful to know. I suggest we move forward. I think we should move forward. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I think, Tony, you've heard this in 2 meetings, so you'll either take it on board or we'll be discussing it again. There's a very low level of trust between a very large, reasonably large group, large enough for me. There's a very low level of trust between special education parents and the administration. We, the board, are fully accountable, so there's a low level of trust to the board. I have to compliment the board, though. I think all of us have taken the special education complaints, because they're so broad and there's so many, but there's lots of consistency between them, quite seriously, which sometimes the board doesn't do that, but this time I really have to commend my other 7 colleagues on taking that very, very seriously. And if in the selection of this committee, once it gets going, because on the face of it, it's a wonderful thing, and it's something we should be fully doing, as Ms. Downey says, and the other board member says, but if that application process is not handled properly, and it's not done with transparency that engenders trust, we'll just be back discussing this again. I hope we don't. I hope we're just moving forward with a committee. So with that, I want to call the question.
Well, Ms. Kowalski's got her hand up and I'd still like to talk. So Ms. Kowalski?
Sure. Thanks, Peter. I just had one question. So look, I think anything that we can do to advance the improvement to our special education program is a huge step forward. The one concern I have is the ability, once this committee, we say yes and we start getting, and I like the idea of the state paying for the consultant, will the public have an opportunity to provide comment to help us and help this committee be able to shape, its goals and expectations, so that the community can help instill whatever 12, 15 people are on this committee, what the broader viewpoints and suggestions are from the town. So I guess that question's to you, Peter Bernstein. Will we have an opportunity to allow the public to comment on what they hope this committee will achieve?
Actually, I guess I'd turn that to Dr. Jones, because she can explain how that works in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to continue our dialogue with the community, and every CX is set up a little bit differently, and some of them actually have a public comment period at the beginning of their meeting, just like the Board of Ed has. So that will be something that would be part of their bylaws to figure out, are they going to have email? Is it going to be, a public section? But usually you find that the parents who have a real interest will attend these meetings as well. So they feel like they're kind of a partner at the table.
Ms. Olson? Megan?
Megan Olson, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I guess I feel like this is, there's the lack of transparency to the public and public feedback, even though I could get on board with this. But at this point, I just feel like it's in some regard, it's like a blank check saying to moving forward with the committee that I still don't fully understand who, I still can't, there's a lot of, people keep saying, it's great. Many people agree, but quite honestly, it's like supporting something, that's supporting something without hearing the voices of, at this point even, and without having transparency for, a diverse group of special education parents does not sit right with me.
Ms. Hirsch?
Again, I'd like to reiterate that this was brought forward to us by a large group of special education parents. I've spoken to a lot of them. This is something that they support, not just through PTA Council, Special Education Committee, through the countless other special education groups within town. And again, there would be an application process. Everybody would have an opportunity to be able to be participatory. And again, ultimately, we as a board have our own policy and governance. We have things when it comes to the formation and the creation of advisory committees. So we do have the opportunity. So they can't be in violation of our own guidelines as to how they do things. So I don't know. I think to me, this is probably the biggest forward movement that we would have in special education to support our special education families and to give them even more of a voice that we've had in years. And to me, it's a no-brainer. And again, from what I've heard from countless individuals, both parents who have students with learning disabilities and learning differences, to educators who are teaching our students with learning differences, this is something that they support. They would all have the opportunity to have a voice in those discussions.
Thank you. This is Peter Bernstein. I absolutely support moving forward with this. I want to thank the parents in the special education community for bringing this forward, for their willingness to collaborate. That hasn't always been the case, and I think it's a very big positive. As Ms. Hirsch mentioned, we do need their voice, especially now when we are very cognizant of a lot of the issues. We've asked the superintendent to move forward with an audit of the program, and I think this is a really good vehicle to do that. All right, so if there's nobody else that's got their hand up, which I don't see, we'll go ahead. The motion on the table is to participate in the state pilot of the Special Education Advisory Committee. So we'll do a roll call vote. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Absolutely, yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
No.
Mr. Scher? Muted, Peter.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes 7-1. Thank you very much. All right, so our next item, I can get back to there, is the interim appropriation request. So Ms. Kowalski, if I heard you right, you want to take this up as 3 different motions. So I just understand
correct.
what to break them up into, and I want to hear from Mr. O'Keefe before we go down that path.
Okay, so I want to break them up into 3 different motions, and forgive me, I'm just bringing this up. I believe there are 3 different items for which we are looking for an appropriation request on. One is special education with respect to out of district tuition and settlements as well. And then the two other items are the $40,000 for the Greenwich High School bleachers shoring up, rental costs, and then the custodial overtime that's currently estimated for the deep cleaning due to COVID-19. I think each of those should be taken up and voted on separately.
Mr. O'Keefe, I just want to hear from you before we go down that path to make sure that that's not going to cause issues.
Okay, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. All right, just very quickly, as you know, back in the February meeting, we announced that we had found some savings that brought our budget exposure down to $775,000. Since that time, we've learned that there's an additional $320,000 of additional students requiring outplacement and settlements. And in addition, during that time, we learned that we would have to fund the January through June scaffolding rental at the on the home bleachers at Greenwich High School. And then, of course, with the deep cleaning going on in all of our schools, we've set up a special account for custodial overtime, and that has been happening. I know from March 2nd through 14th, we incurred 557 hours of overtime. So, and I believe there were some additional hours after that point. So when you add all three of those items up, it gets you to about $1.2 million. Now, I do want to say that we're not discontinuing looking for savings opportunities. In fact, I believe we have some significant savings opportunities. Tony mentioned transportation. That is absolutely one, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on right now, since that could be somewhat of a complicated situation. There's also other school closure related savings. Fuel is another one, utilities is another one, and we don't yet know the yield from our expense freeze that we announced in February. So I do believe that we will mitigate some of that 1.2, a good chunk of it, I'm hopeful. So we haven't stopped. Having said all that, we're also continuing to explore with the town, having them give us the excess cost reimbursement grant that comes to the town every year. Now, for those that do not know, the excess cost reimbursement grant is attributable 100% to our spending in special education. So to the extent that we exceed our budget, the town receives funding from the state. Last year, that amount of money was $1.2 million. I've asked for an estimate of what that could be this year. I don't know what that number is yet, but what it is, the town will receive some money in May, and that could also go against the exposure. So there's a lot of balls in the air, but in the interest of caution, the reason we have this motion tonight is that we cannot end the year with a negative balance. So purely just in abundance of caution, we would like to submit an interim request for the 1.2, knowing full well that I think we will get some additional savings. And to the extent that we do, we would certainly return that money to the town.
Sean, I guess what I want to find out, though, is it okay to break these up into three motions? I mean, at the end of the day,
that was the question.
whatever the final
Okay.
amount is, that would be the interim. Is that going to be a problem?
Well, the paperwork has already gone to the town in total with that information. So it is the $1.2 million is broken up between those three items.
Okay. I mean, if
in the detail provided to the town.
Right. If we needed to communicate a change, that certainly could happen.
I think so.
Okay. So Ms. Kowalski, I don't know which one you want to take first, but if you want to make a motion.
Sure. So this is Karen Kowalski, the Board of Ed. I'd like to, I think we should do with the two that are the easiest here. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the $40,000 allotment for the Greenwich High School bleachers shoring up rental costs from January through June of 2020.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that one.
Mr. Kelly, thank you. All right, discussion. No discussion. All right, Mr. Scher.
I got to get off on mute. I didn't understand, Sean, what you just said. You said that we didn't know about this cost? We knew about this cost. I'm not sure I understood what you were saying.
The cost associated with the shoring up was being funded by the GAF.
Yes.
Unfortunately, their funding stopped in December. So we still have the remaining 6 months.
Yeah, we knew that. Okay. I was just like, I didn't, at the very first board meeting, this was handled at a special board meeting in July, where the GAF kindly stepped in after our bleachers had been condemned. They came forward to reopen the bleachers, and they fully funded that through, and they were very clear they would fund that through December. So I guess I was just, it's not a surprise to me, and it's not a surprise to anybody who was on the board then, and it certainly isn't a surprise to the superintendent. But okay.
Well, maybe it was, since the budget was developed in 2018, it probably wasn't budgeted discretely.
Well, that's most certainly true, because there wasn't.
All right.
This is the project that has wandered all over the place. So yeah, but I mean, I guess I'm a little surprised, Sean, that we knew this in July, and we knew that the GAF was covering us in December, and that it's sounding like, from what you're saying, is in that intervening 6 months, no one in the administration planned this, saying we'd have to take the money from someplace else to fund this. It's not like this is a surprise that showed up on our doorstep in December. Okay, it is what it is, but.
Mr. Scher, I'm gonna pass over to Mr. Kelly.
I think we have to shore up the bleachers so they don't fall down. I don't think we have much more discussion to be had on this topic.
All right, with that as the case, I think, Mr. Kelly, you were calling the question, is that correct?
Pardon?
You're calling the question, you'd like us to vote?
Correct.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so I am a yes for the request the interim for shoring up the bleachers. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, Ms. Kowalski, you want to make your second motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to take up a additional interim appropriation for the custodial overtime that is currently estimated at $40,000 for deep cleaning of the schools due to COVID-19.
Is there a second for that? Actually, I'll second that. Let's make it really easy. Discussion. Hearing none. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski, sorry.
That's my father. Yes.
And he votes yes too. Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Kowalski, the last one.
All right. I'd like to, I don't know if the math is right if we do it this way, but I would like to make a motion to take up the additional costs associated with attributed to special education out of district tuition and settlements, which should be the amount of
1.1.
Thank you. Well, $1.1 million.
I'll second that. Discussion? Ms. Kowalski, since you moved it.
Yeah, sure. So I guess my question, first off, is from the 1.1, what part of that is associated to settlements we know about, or I guess expected settlements versus out-of-district tuition? I view those as two separate things, and I'm wondering, I would think you do too for budgetary purposes, because I think my understanding is in the budget for out-of-district expenses, there's the line item is about 5.4 million when I went back to double check, and I think from discussions that we've had, it was 2.8 for one and 2.6 for the other. I'm not sure which one is outplacements versus settlements, but what I'd like to know is, what is our current spend for out-of-district tuition? What is our current spend on settlements? And what do we think it's going to be going forward?
Okay, as far as with the additional exposure that we've got, that was just recently learned, we're probably, and this is before any budget transfers, our gross spend for out-of-district placements plus settlements will probably come in around 6.9 versus a budget of 5.4. Obviously, we've moved budget in there, additional budget, so the exposure is now 1.1. As far as the split between the out-of-district placement and settlements, I do not have that with me, but if I had to guess, and I know Mary is on, if she could venture a guess as to the split of that 6.9 million, I would say it's probably, anywhere from 40-60 to 60-40, in that range. Mary, are you on?
I don't know if she's muted.
No. But I can get you that information, certainly.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's roughly 60-40,
Which way?
60 outplacement tuition?
right, to 40 settlements. But we're kind of in the same limbo as a lot of people are, given given our current status with kids in and out of school. So some of the students that we were planning to move to out-of-district placements, at this point, we haven't been able to move because nobody's in school. So the numbers may change slightly as we get back into buildings and we find out what the status is of those students and those out-of-district placements.
All right, Mr. Scher?
Yeah, Sean, can we back up this subject? I got to get straight on the numbers. We allocated our budget this year. So we're talking about, not talking about next year, correct?
Current year number, 6.9 million. So
Yeah,
basically,
we're talking about our 1920 budget. We're not talking about our 2021 budget, correct?
correct.
Okay. We budgeted for 1920, which is the current school year, $5.4 million. That's the amount that's in the budget.
Correct.
To pay for out-of-district placements, which are students that by law wind up getting placed in a school setting other than ours. And settlements, which are when parents challenge us on our administration of special education, and we wind up settling with them. I can't imagine we wouldn't settle if we weren't making a mistake, but okay, whatever. We're settling, and those two budgets combined are 5.4. Correct?
Correct. The budget is 5.4 in total.
Okay. When we were in a session meeting, we were in executive session because we wanted to talk about details. The reason we were there, and that information is confidential. But we've asked this question both in and out, and at that meeting, we were told that of the 5.4 that was budgeted, to Mary's point, 60/40, 2.8, I took my notes, 2.8 of it was for out-of-district settlement, out-of-district placements. And 2.6 was for settlements, legal settlements with, or arbitrated settlements, mediated settlements with special education parents. My question is, if it's 2.8 for out of district and it's 2.6 through February, because that's the only month the last month we've closed our books, right? We're in the middle of March. Do you know how much of that 5.4, preferably broken down, we have already spent?
Actually invoiced and paid?
Whatever
Yeah.
you, however you account for actuals through February.
I think we're actually, if not, we're at 5.4, we're slightly over already, and with bills still to come in.
Okay, so we've exhausted the budget at the end of February.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, what is the forecast? Did you developed a forecast? That's how you're coming to 6.9?
Correct.
And you don't know how the difference between 5.4 and 6.9 would be 1.5 million. You don't know how that 1.5 breaks down into paying for out-of-district settlements, out-of-district placements versus settlements.
Well, with Mary's split of 60/40, and against the budget, that numbers that you quoted, 2.8 of out-of-district budget is at 60% is 4.1. So 2.8 growing to 4.1, and settlements budgeted at 2.6 going to 2.8.
But that's a guess, right?
Peter, we've got other members who are asking to speak. So I'm going to ask you to wrap it up for now, and we'll come back to you if you still have questions.
I'm amazed, Peter Bernstein, that we're in a meeting talking about all of this money and we can't explain what the money is for, given.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to turn to the next speaker. We will come back to you if you'd like. Ms. Stowe.
Kathleen Stowe, Board of Education. As a matter of principle, I don't love adding to a budget. Having said that, this was clearly unpredictable, and I know it's a sort of a thorn in all of our sides. But given the world, given the fact that we might not be able to get in front of the BET and the RTM, I think it's important that we sort of ask for this money, knowing, and I know Sean especially is committed to this, that if we don't spend it, that we will obviously do our best to still budget, find savings, and give all the money back.
Ms. Olson.
Yes, I tend to think some of this is somewhat predictable because I've said before, I think there's, poor management in the special education department, and that leads to outcomes like this. I think Peter Scher had said that, some of these settlements aren't because some are out of district placements, and some of these are, not because we're doing our job well necessarily in the special education department from the top down. So I can't support this because I feel like we're continually, bailing out a system that is not functioning properly, and not only is it affecting our special education students and community, it's also affecting our general education students and community. And at this point, my vote would be a no when we get there.
Ms. Downey.
I'm just looking back over my notes from that executive session we had, where, just to refresh people's memory, the 5.4 in the budget was set in October of 2018 for the current year's budget. The actual number for 18-19 was 5.6. So the budget of that year was already exceeded what we had. And my notes from the meetings, whatever were floating around, is that as of February, the outplacements and settlements was already at 5.6. I'm sorry, not February, end of January. So if we've acquired additional students and we have additional costs, what it says to me is obviously the 5.4 was a flawed number to be using in our budget to begin with. But be that as it may, that doesn't change that we're sitting here short of money. And I think we're going to be short again next year. We're going to have, this is a continuing problem until we really sit down and pursue a full review of the program and if there's any cost savings to be achieved. And it seems to me that we have to spend this money this year. I don't really see what other option we have. These are legal obligations that we have to provide for these students. And yes, we might get a little give on it because of the lack of actual schooling this year. But to me, it seems like we have to ask for the money that we believe we're going to need to get us through the rest of the school year that is not budgeted. And as Sean said, we will get, if to the extent we don't need that money, we're not going to keep the money and use it for other things. So I think good fiscal stewardship says to me, we have to ask for what we believe we need to get us through the current year. And then I think we have to look at it on a going forward basis as well, because our budget that we've submitted already to the BET and to the RTM, we're already going to be short next year. So this is going to be a recurring problem, but we can only deal with the matter at hand and the problem of the moment. So I think we just need to be cognizant of those numbers and those facts in making our decision.
Ms. Kowalski.
Sure. So I actually have a list of questions. So you had, at the beginning of this conversation, there was an expectation that we would receive money from the state. Apparently we received $1.2 million last year from the state. We're expecting it to come in May. What is the, so I'll just list off the questions and then we can go for it. My question is, what is the expectation that we would receive any money from the state at this point in time? With a caveat to that is it a possibility that we will receive no money from the state in May in connection with this?
There is a possibility that, not a possibility, it is a very high possibility that the town will receive money in May. As far as the odds of us getting our hands on that money, which we are legally entitled to, I can't comment on. That's why we're working with the town.
Okay. My next question is, what happens if we say no and we still have to pay these bills? Where does the money come from then? Which may be an obvious question, but I'm just going to ask it so we hear the answer.
Well, as I said earlier, we're expecting some savings. And I think it will definitely yield savings. Can I tell you right now that we're going to have savings to offset all of the exposures? I can't tell you that right now. So okay. The bottom line is we've got to close the books without a negative balance.
Okay. And Peter Burstein, I just have one more question and then a comment. One is, do we have a list that can be circulated of all of the students that have come in with the special ed program that now need out of district placements that we did not know about, and when did they come in? I think that that's helpful for understanding our budget deficit issues as we go forward. I mean, obviously we started a budget with a particular number of students that we knew needed out placements and what that cost would be. How is that? What I want to know is, and you may not have it in front of you, is how has that changed? When did these new students come in, and when did we know that they were coming? That is, I think, a helpful data point that I need going forward when we continue to ask for more money. My last comment on this particular topic is from a budgeting process. I think we're now, and I know we're into the phase of budgeting for again, I think for what is it, 2022 at this point, but we need to include or figure out how to create a stopgap so we stop having these conversations, so that there is, whether you want to call it a slush fund, a provision, a separate set of money that can be drawn on, so we are not having these conversations, because there are going to be overages. Look, a budget is only, we do budgets all the time. It's great when you come in under budget. It really stinks when you are over budget. It seems like we are always over budget. And I think we either need to plan better in this area or put aside a certain provision that just entitles us to draw into it for these types of reoccurring, these unknown, and I'm not quite sure unknown is the right word, but these expenses as they come in, because I think the last time that we had this conversation and how we were getting down a budget, money was taken from other areas where we had some room to wiggle. And I had asked then, and I don't recall having seen it, where did that money come from? Because clearly we took money from something that was allocated to something else that could have gone to other programs and other students that were using those programs. I still want to know where that money came from and where were we taking it from. But I think that we need to consider that for our budgeting process going forward, is this provisional allotment of cash that we can draw on these circumstances.
Karen, I totally agree with you that a better process is warranted. And I have already started developing that process to forecast by outplacement, by settlement. And with all that information that we have for this year, so we know what we're spending this year, I've developed a spreadsheet that I will review with Mary, where she can comment on, based on what she knows for each student, will that student be returning next year? Will the situation be the same? And we should be able to get a very good handle, bottoms up estimate of what we need in the following year. Which is why, to answer one of your other questions, is are we exposed for next year? And the answer is absolutely yes, probably to the tune of $1.5 million.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
But going forward, any further budgets will be a bottoms up budget. I don't think it's been bottoms up before.
Okay, and then look, the two takeaways, or the two things that I'm leaving on the table that I still want to see is, one, I'd like to know when these additional costs for out district placements came in, when we became aware of them, and two, when we were working with the budget to figure out where we had room to wiggle, I want to know where the wiggle came from.
Okay. As far as the additional 300,000+, that is brand new news to me in the last 7 to 10 days.
And that you mean, sorry, that's what the 300,000, you mean that's new news, meaning you didn't know we were having.
There were new placements or settlements.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things to differentiate there is which one of those are settlements and which one of those are outplacements.
We will definitely have that information, obviously without any student names.
Correct, thank you.
Okay, sorry, this is Peter Bernstein. We did get some of that information in our previous executive session, so I guess no student information, please. That's not something we can share publicly. I guess what I'll say is, historically, I've always felt uncomfortable with the budget transfers to cover the hole in this. And this goes back a ways. If we have been consistent in one thing, it is overspending on these lines, which means not properly accounting for them. Mr. O'Keefe joined us late last year, late in the budget process, and he recognized this immediately. And to his credit, he's been looking at this issue since the day he got here, and knows that we need to work on this. we do need a creative solution, whether it's a revolving account or, you know, working out with the town the excess cost funding from the state being returned to the Board of Ed per the statute. But we really do need better information. And because of that, I really do want the audit to happen, because I think the only way we're really going to properly be able to budget is to understand the process behind this. And to make sure that there are controls in place so that we can properly plan for this. You know, we keep saying it's a surprise, it's a surprise. It just really speaks to the planning and how we do this. One last note, you know, as much as I hate the budget transfers, we do need to end the year with a positive balance. Anybody that's paid attention to our end of the year financial reports, it's the first one we take up in September meetings. We have been trending to the point where we return less and less money to the town. This is the primary reason for that. And I think without requesting this interim, we could be in a position where we're unable to close our books, and that's actually not something we can do. So I'm going to support this, but you know, I'm going to continue to push. Hopefully, better information, better process, and you know, and let's get the audit done. All right, Ms. Hirsch.
Well, I was sort of going to echo what Mr. Bernstein had just said. I mean, but ultimately, I don't like spending this kind of money without knowing further details. We got a lot of information on out-of-district placements, what students may have come in with out-of-district placements already in place. During our executive session, I know I have planned to request another one once we're, you know, allowed to all meet again in a public, whatever person, that's the word I'm looking for. But ultimately, we're legally mandated to provide these services and support to our students. We've had tight budgets over the past several years, so building in a buffer has not, you know, on the possibility is not something that we've really been able to do. I think it's part of the main reason that this Board of Education has specifically asked for an outside program full audit for special education, so that we can sort of figure out where the issues are and how, again, for cost savings. Again, much like the rest of the board, I don't particularly enjoy rubber stamping something without knowing full details, but I think in this instance, again, we are working towards getting more details so that we can better plan in the future. And we are legally mandated to provide these services to students that need them. So I'm not really sure what our alternatives would be.
Mr. Sheriff.
I'm in a different place with this. This idea that, you know, the town of Greenwich is sitting on our money is, you know, just factually incorrect. They've given us the excess cost sharing grant, whether they get it from the state of Connecticut or not. That's included in our budget. So to continue to perpetuate this idea that the town of Greenwich is somehow stealing money from the Board of Education is kind of a reckless assertion, and we should stop doing it. Regarding this particular appropriation, we need to highlight, we've already stolen $400,000. That's 4 full-time, very senior teachers in the budget to add to special education this year. We've gone from 4.5 and we've 5.4. We've already gone to 5.8. And now we're asked back looking for another 1.1. We don't control out of district placements. And by Mary's math, on a $1.1 million, that's $660,000. We should absolutely be asking for that because we don't control that. There's nothing the school district can do about that. It's just going to happen. And we need to condition the town of Greenwich that when these things that are outside our control happen, they need to find a way with a rainy day fund to cover that. So it removes variability in our budget. However, the other 440 that's being asked for by Mary's math is for settlements. And let's just underline, settlements are legal agreements we arrive at with parents that we have to agree to largely because we screwed up in special education. And I got to tell you, I have no problem asking the BET for $660,000. I got a real problem asking them for another $440,000 that will be handed over to the special education department to do more settlements that are by and large because we screwed up. That just really sticks in my craw. And I don't know how I'm going to vote. If we were asking for 660, you'd have my immediate vote. The fact that we're already transferred 400 and now we're looking for more because we continue to make mistakes in special education, I think is just, it's irresponsible.
I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt here. I have to interrupt and say, I thought I was pretty clear in our executive session, and I can't let it stand when you say things like, we are settling because we screwed up. There are a number of reasons why we settle with families, and they are not about screwing up. Some of them are because we're placing students in programs where they are not approved by the state education department, because we can't find any program that will take the student. So I appreciate some of the conversation here, but please do not say that all settlements are because we screwed up. We are working very hard to serve kids with very significant disabilities. And in some cases that results in a settlement, and in some cases it results in an out-of-district placement.
Thank you, Mary. All right, Joe Kelly.
Hi, Joe Kelly. Well, just one comment. We're not stealing from anybody. We're just simply not budgeting for it. We need to budget for things a little more aggressively. As far as overrunning costs, maybe or maybe not, we need to manage better. We have to look into that, and that's what we have to do is manage that. My question I have is to Megan. Megan, you're saying something about not supporting this vote. Now, we've spent this money. We're gonna not agree to pay this money? Is that what the not supporting this vote means?
Megan Olson, can you hear me? Yeah. Am I on, Peter?
Yes, you're on.
Okay. I'm saying that I do understand that, yeah, we spent this money and it needs to, we're not in a position that we would like to be in. I fully understand that. What I'm saying is that, you know, what was just mentioned, Mary Ford just came on and said she didn't like the idea of saying that, you know, parents have screwed, I mean, that special education has, and I quote, screwed up, but we have continued to make, it's been mismanaged and there have been mistakes have been made. I'll use that language instead. And I can't continue to, in a sense, like continue to support bailing out a mismanaged special education department as it's continuing to affect general education as well. So at this point, what I'm saying is, I do believe, yeah, it needs to get paid, but can I support doing that? No. So that's what I'm saying.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, thank you. All right, I just need a clarification on what we have to support this. We have to pay it.
Okay. Ms. Downey.
I kind of said my point about the numbers earlier, and before Mary spoke up, I was checking my notes. And it is, out of those settlement numbers, it is not, we call it settlements, but it's not just the legal settlements. It does include, and my recollection, without getting into the details, is a number of cases where placements out of Connecticut or out of state approved facilities that are basically the equivalent of out of district placements, but they're categorized differently. So we're not really comparing them, and you know, when we call them settlements versus out of district placements, the category settlements includes a number of placements that are just not state approved out of placement districts. So I think we're getting hung up on calling settlements that's all legal obligations in terms of litigation, when it's not in fact the case. So I think if people go back and look at their notes from that meeting or we have another executive session at some point to talk about it a little further, to delve into that particular issue, I think people will realize that however it's categorized, part of that number, it really is X percent, a very large percentage is actually placements for students not in the Greenwich Public Schools. It's not simply costs of litigation. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, Ms. Hirsch.
Oh, well, I think Christina actually hit my points in saying this. And, I think time and time again, we have used this as an opportunity to discuss the changes that may be needed in our special education program, but that's not what this discussion is about. We know that there needs to be change. We know that we're looking into it. That's why we have an audit coming hopefully next year. It's in our budget, and we really need to move forward for what's going on this year, knowing that these changes need to be made in budgetary numbers going forward. We need to look into it in a deeper manner, but we are where we are now. And instead of taking this opportunity to constantly go back to the same discussions, we know what needs to be done. We need to move forward for the students that we have now that have needs. And going forward, we need to figure out how to budget better for this. And that's plain as day. But ultimately, the people at the end of this are the students that will suffer if we vote no. And again, I'm not a big fan of spending money willy-nilly, but so it's sort of a problem.
Ms. Stowe.
Ditto. We have no choice. We have to address this as the special education audit. There's no doubt about that. But we need the money. We can't end the year without less than zero. So I think we should call a vote.
All right, given you're calling the question, Ms. Kowalski, I just want to clarify your motion. It was a motion to request the balance of the 1.2, which is actually 1.12 million for special education out of district placements and settlements. Is that correct?
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so we'll take our vote. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
No.
Mr. Scher?
No.
Okay, that passes 6-2. Thank you very much. Which brings us to our last action item for the evening, which is the financial and staffing report. So I'll make a motion that we accept the financial and staffing report. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Ms. Stowe seconds. Mr. O'Keefe.
Very quickly, we've kind of covered the operating fund pretty extensively, but I did want to comment on capital. We continue to make significant progress. In the February report, we're down to $24.4 million in available funds. And I checked today, we're down another $3 million. So since December, we've taken our available debt balance down by 33%, or about $10 million.
All right, any questions or discussion?
John, I have a question.
Mr. Chair.
I don't know about what an essential employee is in Connecticut. I do know they're building the house next door to me because I hear it every single morning. Are we still doing capital projects, or are those, so to speak, quarantined also?
Yes, there is capital work still going on.
So what do we anticipate? Do you have a forecast of where we'll be at June 30 on capital projects closed? Remaining capital open?
For June 30, I do not have that forecast yet. I'll get that though. I mean, obviously we're working it down day after day. That's a huge focus. The reason I'm asking is it's important to know exactly where we stand as our budget for next year, which is a whole nother subject, is considered in, somebody's got me on echo, it's echoing, is considered in April and May. Is there a question? Was that a question?
Yeah, no, I was just pointing out, we really need a good forecast going into the budget meetings in April with the BET and in May
Gotcha.
with
Okay.
the RTM. Ideally, that number would be as low as possible. You don't want, it's better if the forecast comes from you than having either of those bodies guess.
Sure. I will get that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Jones.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I had a conversation with Dan Watson just in regards to projects today, and he's going in and really looking at what we can do right now when schools are closed. So if we have projects that are outside, we can do some things in the next week that we might not have done before. However, some of the projects that need to be inside the building, we have to be careful about allowing the contractors to come inside when we've done all the deep cleaning, because they could bring the virus back inside the building. So I know he's working on that right now, and I don't think he was live with the cabinet tonight, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, all those in favor of approving the financial staffing report, I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
All right, that's unanimous, 8-0. Thank you. All right, the one remaining item is agenda planning, which is a little bit difficult. Just for those playing bingo at home, we obviously had a number of items on the plan for tonight that we've had to move off, including ed specs for JC, update from Key to Ed because they can't travel to us. So we're going to have to do a little rejiggering of our schedule. I welcome members' feedback. So board members, take a look at the agenda plan. Let's think about what we want to do in person and hold off on. Let's think about what we think we can take up. I think the special ed discussions, my personal preference is to do those in person. I think that requires that level of effort, but there are other things that we might be able to take up, sooner than later. I note that our next scheduled meeting is a board professional development session on April 2nd. It's set for strategic planning. So Peter, I guess I want to hear from you and the committee members on whether or not we think we should move forward with that. I would add, if we are going to move forward, I would add a superintendent update to the meeting. And I think every time we meet, we probably should have that.
Yeah, Peter, I'm glad you asked. I would not recommend moving forward. I think we need to readjust that schedule. In my experience, you can do strategic planning like we're doing it remotely. If you don't have to, it's much better to have people in the room. And since this is running on our own schedule, I would defer it. The second more important reason is that I was able to get someone as a facilitator, calling in a favor. But that's not, I talked to the facilitator, they said they prefer not to do it if they can't have the team in the room, so we would lose our facilitator. So for those two reasons, I would suggest we postpone this until we get more clarity when we can get back together. It may ultimately be, and sometime in the future, we do it remotely, but I wouldn't recommend, given where we are right now, I would suggest we don't do that and we wait to see what develops.
Peter, I think that makes an awful lot of sense, and I know you wanted to do some community engagement, and I think that's probably something that's going to have to wait as well. So we can talk about on an upcoming call maybe how you want to adjust the schedule. So if you get with your committee by phone and think about that, whether we extend out into the fall, I think everybody's going to understand and be comfortable with that. It doesn't mean the work ends. So. All right, we will do the best we can to maintain our regular meetings. We could actually schedule, I don't know, I'll ask Dr. Jones first if she's willing, maybe to just do a quick update call. We could repurpose the second for that, just in case she's got things she needs to tell the board. And that way we can meet that way. And then our next meeting after that is April 23rd. And again, we'll revisit where we are and what we think the the agenda items that need to get addressed are. So Dr. Jones, I don't know if the second.
Yeah, on April 2nd, we could certainly do an update. That's like right around the corner. So it's just a week away. We may have more information from the state by then, but probably not too much. I'm not anticipating that early, but we could do an update call. Never hurts, because this information with coronavirus changes pretty much on a daily basis.
All right, everybody else comfortable with that? Joe, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, just an agenda item. There's a donation approval for a expensive wrestling mat or something we need to put it on the agenda. I've been contacted about.
All right, nothing I've heard about. So Dr. Jones, I guess if you have any paperwork for that.
This is the first time hearing of it as well, unless Sean has heard something. O'Keefe?
What is it, a wrestling mat?
Yeah, the GAF has donated money to the wrestling team, and they've raised money as well. And they've been contacting me about getting it on the agenda for approval.
Well, they've got to fill out the paperwork and get it submitted through the normal channel. So once that happens, then Dr. Jones will ask to put it on the agenda.
Okay, so they haven't done their part on getting the paperwork done. Okay.
If Mr. O'Keefe is unaware of it, they have not done their part, because I believe that paperwork runs to him.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Ms. Hirsch.
I know that, we don't have specific dates based on the fact that our buildings are closed, but I would like to make sure that we add, next time we have our special education program report, that we do add another executive session for special education to follow. I mean, it may not necessarily be a business meeting, but it should follow when we have that program report, because I'm sure we'll have questions that need to be answered in an executive session.
Noted. Ms. Downey.
Just in terms of, next week's meeting or not, I guess the question is, and I would leave it to the discretion of perhaps the chair and Dr. Jones, that if we think it's worth having a call and an update on the 2nd, or given that there's a long stretch of time between the 2nd and the 23rd, it might make sense to have that same call and update in 2 weeks' time. And the original reason we weren't doing a meeting then was because it was spring break. And now that if we're not having a spring break, that perhaps to the extent we have another meeting and schedule it, that I maybe Peter and Tony, you guys should make a decision about what you think the next best meeting time or number of meetings is. And then we will make ourselves available on an as needed basis. But to, if next Thursday we're not really in a different place, but whether it makes sense, that was just a thought.
No, it's a very good thought. So yes, I will connect with Tony and Kathleen. We'll do a quick chair meeting. Some of this is we have that meeting date scheduled, but we can always cancel it and reschedule another meeting. Given the state of things, I mean, if there's something that's an emergency meeting, we can call that within 24 hours. So we have some flexibility to do that. But I'll work with that.
Well, we're not going to be doing, no matter what, our agenda is not going to involve the strategic plan. So we're going to have to change the nature of the meeting next week anyway, either.
Oh, absolutely. We'll take.
So once we're doing it, decide if it's even worth doing when you guys have an opportunity to make that evaluation, I would suggest.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else from board members on agenda planning? I guess thank you everybody for your flexibility. Again, this is about resilience at this time. It's an amazing community, and we all hear from a lot of people. There's always good, there's always bad, there's always room for improvement. But we're well positioned and we're moving in the right direction. So, Dr. Jones, again, thank you to you. Thank you to your entire team. Thank you to the entire staff. And with that, Mr. Kelly, do you have a motion for us?
I do. I have got a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Looks like Ms. Kowalski is interested. All right, I'm going to do a roll call vote because, that's what we have to do in this day and age. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe, would you like to adjourn?
Yes, and thank you to Michael Antanasio for setting this all up. So.
Oh, absolutely. Ms. Hirsch?
I'd like to say, second Michael, who did a lot of work to get this going for all of us.
Okay, but do you want to adjourn?
But yes, let's
You're
adjourn.
lengthening the meeting.
I'm
Ms.
hungry.
Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes, absolutely.
Ms. Kowalski,
Yes, and so does my dog.
Ms. Olson.
Yes.
I hope the 3-year-old's asleep. Mr. Scher. Mr. Scher? I think Mr. Scher may be on mute or he's only left the meeting. We are adjourned. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.